Hello, this is Aaron, and welcome back to the podcast again. For the first time since I started doing these live, I actually aborted one shortly after starting because I realized I had screwed something up. I think I already deleted it. So if you saw that, then this is what happens when you do things live. No chance to edit. Anyhow, this will hopefully be a short one because I do have an appointment coming up. That's probably why I messed something up. I was a little rushed for time. It is a topic that I plan to return to. I originally planned on writing about it a long time ago. I just haven't fully developed it yet. But it's just an observation that I've had, which is that conservatives have this deep need, it almost seems to be pathological at some level, to have other people make their points for them, to have other people advocate for them on their behalf. So what do I mean by that? Conservatives love liberals who argue that the far left is going too far this time. You know, the anti-woke liberal is someone that the conservative is definitely going to promote, is definitely going to classify as one of the good guys. Even if this person is aligned with the left on 98% of the issues, they're going to think that this is someone that you could really partner with, that you should really be seeking as an ally, that you should really be promoting because they're criticizing wokeness, for example. They also love women who make points on sort of gender issues, even men's issues. So that's why, for example, Mary Harrington or Louise Perry today are getting a lot of press on that. They like to have black people talk about race on their behalf. They like to have Muslims arguing for religious freedom or protesting against some dodgy content in the schools. And the latest one that I've started noticing is they love to see gays who are saying that the transgender agenda has gone so far. So you start putting some of these together and you understand why so many conservatives and normie types absolutely love Bari Weiss. She is a liberal, female, lesbian who criticizes wokeness and child transgenderism at her site. And this is like all the combinations hitting all the buzzers, all the bells, right? So it's like, wow, we love Bari Weiss. Bari Weiss is a champion for us. And people just love Bari Weiss because they love people with that profile making the points that they believe but cannot confidently make for themselves. And there's, nothing wrong with engaging with a lot of these people or, linking to their work. I think I've linked to Mary Harrington myself, for example. I think some of these people have interesting things to say, but it's weird how in conservative land, these people sort of take over all of the, high profile de facto spokesman role in some cases. And so you see this on gender issues. You've noticed it for a long time. Basically, every prominent conservative who speaks on sort of gender issues and that you quote unquote anti-feminist, right, in some ways, has been a woman. It's been Helen Smith, Christina Hoff Sommers at AEI, Kay Heimowitz, Manhattan Institute, Mary Harrington. It's a number. The front people on the gender issues tend to be women. Like these become the go-to people on that. I think it's interesting that the recent book of Boys and Men that was really focused on men's issues actually written by a liberal, Richard Reeves, at the Brookings Institution. I don't think there are any, and maybe I'm forgetting one, maybe I'm spacing. I don't know that there have been any like really prominent conservative think tankers or things focused on sort of gender, men who are focused on kind of gender issues. They don't do it. It's like we got to find the right profile of person who we view somehow as having standing. And of course, these people, they have their own agendas, which may be partially aligned with the conservative agenda, but it may not. I notice a lot of the Mary Harringtons and the Louise Perry types, they now have a new website out called Fairer Disputations. You can check it out. I think it's called fairerdisputations.org. It's got people like Catherine D. There's another one, Leah Labrusco Sargent. I really like her. a bunch of different writers, almost entirely female, although I did note that Carl Trueman, the very conservative Presbyterian college professor, sort of public intellectual in the evangelical world, has written for them. He's an interesting fellow in that he's sort of one of these people who is seen as very conservative, but he's obviously got a soft spot for feminism. But what is this site? What is their subtitle? Sex Realist Feminism. I mean, these people are repping, at the end of the day, feminism, which is to say they are repping a fundamentally female perspective and fundamentally female agenda. They're going to look at this naturally in terms of how it affects them. So if you're a guy, like conservative guy, and you're going to point out all these people, you're going to link to all these people, you're going to rely on them to be your spokesman, they're probably not going to have your perspective or necessarily the entirety of your interest or your preferences in mind, just because they're not you, right? You need to represent you. You can't just go find these proxies to go, you think speak on your behalf. They're going to speak what they think, and that's great. And again, link to them, interact with them. But ultimately, at the end of the day, right, if you're the proverbial white male, you have to be able to stand up for yourself. If you're somebody who can't stand up for yourself, then you can't expect that like other people are going to stand up for you. And there are people in this world who are so down and out, so vulnerable that they do need other people to speak on their behalf. But if you're watching this, chances are that's not you. And this is, I focus on, kind of the men's piece because that's more kind of my issue that I talk about. But this is something that is just really endemic to how conservatives think. And, you see it like, so I love Rod Dreher. I think Rod Dreher is great, but Rod Dreher loves these kinds of people. Rod Dreher is always looking to say, oh, here's Andrew Sullivan criticizing the trans agenda. Here's Barry Weiss. He's kind of someone who really does seem to be wanting to make allies among these people, but he's hardly alone. He just has a big platform and talks to them. These are the people that get built up as spokesmen. Whereas I think it's really interesting on the men's front that if you look at the sort of the online men's figures, what are they? They're all men. There aren't this large numbers of young men out there flocking to the banner of different female leaders. So if you actually want to inspire, it definitely helps to stand up for yourself. So that's one that I just think is weird, and you should pay attention to it. The way that conservatives are deeply hesitant to advocate for themselves or their own positions directly, and really seem to have a very strong preference to have someone who is very different from them, in some respects on the other side from them, in some cases being liberals, make their points. And this is one that has to be overcome. And yes, in our society, there is this situation, right, where, in a kind of a world of Black Lives Matter, the theory would be, hey, Black people are going to be more listened to on this, so let's have Tim Scott, let's have Glenn Loury. I mean, Glenn Loury's awesome, by the way. Listen to Glenn Loury. And so I understand the thought process there, but realistically, it's not going to work, okay? And this idea that like, they'll listen to the conservative Black guy, they're not going to listen to the conservative Black guy. He's going to get called a white supremacist, just as we've seen how as the Hispanic vote starts shifting towards Republicans, now the newspapers are writing, all of this, these articles now about non-white, white supremacy and the like. They're just going to get trashed. And two, they're not going to get listened to. They're not going to move the market either. And so it isn't even really going to work on kind of that respect. And in a world kind of where you're a little bit out of favor, maybe think about this in the Christian perspective. Think about it from the negative world. I do think it changes how you interact in public. You can't go forward in a manner that you could when you're majority. I think it means being more selective in what you put forward, that you probably shouldn't try to, line up and directly confront a lot of things where you're clearly a minority. Now, I mean, that's unpopular, but that's That's sort of what I think it means. It's kind of like, oh, let's just send our conscripts into the meat grinder. It's probably not going to work out for most people. On the other hand, you still actually have to say, okay, what are our interests? And think much more about, hey, we have to kind of rep our interest here. We have to be thinking about that and not hoping that someone else comes along and says, whoa, what do we, here's the imam who wants to say, well, what about these Christians over here? Maybe they should have some freedoms too. If you're just waiting for that, it's not going to happen. And so just watch how many times, and Barry Weiss is a good one since she's so big. They all love to talk about Barry Weiss, who is a liberal. I don't think she shares much in the way conservative values at all, but because she's sort of anti-woke and on a few things, all of a sudden she resigned from the New York Times. All of a sudden they love her, and now she gets like far more references from conservatives than a lot of actual conservative people do. And so watch for that. It's something I want to talk about more. Just keep an eye out. Would love to know what things you're seeing. But in my view, you have to learn how to stand up for yourself. And with that, I will wrap up this short edition for this week.